evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4 o'clock. Council, any additions or deletions to today's agenda? Administration?
No.
And with that, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Race.
I move to adopt the regular council agenda September 15th, 2020.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council minute for adoption. I will entertain a motion. Councilor Haas.
I'd like to make the motion to accept regular meeting of council minutes September 1st, 2020, and the standing committee of council minutes for September 8th, 2020.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councilor Nelson.
Move to split, please.
Okay, we have a motion to split. And the first one we'll deal with is the regular meeting council minutes for September 1st. Councilor Nelson.
I don't feel that the minutes properly reflect the motions that were made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, anything further? Councilor Magoon.
Just a point of clarification. I was wondering, Councilor Nelson, could you speak to that directly so I could get some clarification further?
It's a weird situation. So we were public, but we were it was not recorded, and there were motions made, and then a motion to withdraw, and then subsequently it was determined that we were going to do a friendly withdrawal instead, but we had already voted on both we voted on the motion to withdraw. So it's just I think a difference of opinion on how it's interpreted. So.
Councilor Magoon, anything further?
Yeah, I just personally, I could support it tonight, but also if there was any appetite from council, I'd also be willing, I'd support tabling it until we can get further clarification. Either or, I don't unfortunately have anything clear that says to me there's a major problem on the floor though.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, anything further for the first adoption of the minutes for September 1st? And seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that was carried 6-1. Nelson opposed. The second one we have is standing committee council minutes for September 8th, 2020. Council, any questions, debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. That will bring us to our citizens a minute with council. Ms. Anderson, any with council today?
There are none.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. That'll bring us to our delegations and presentations for today. We have one, Explore Hinton, presented by Natalie Charlton in the Hinton District Chamber of Commerce. Hello, Natalie.
Hello. How is everybody?
Good, good. You?
Good. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Natalie Charlton. I am the Executive Director at the Hinton District Chamber of Commerce. And with me today is Matt Davies, our Administrative Assistant for the Chamber. And we are doing our best to safe distance, so I've got him tucked in the corner. I wanted to take an opportunity today just to give you an update of where things were at with the Visitors Information Center this summer, and an initiative that we've been working on, Explore Hinton, that has been done in partnership with the town of Hinton and the Hinton Chamber. So Wendy, you're going to drive the slides for me. So next slide, please. As you're aware, the Chamber has been managing the Travel Alberta Centre for the last 10 plus years, and we employed 3 full-time and 1 part-time seasonal staff from May until October. Next slide. In January, we were advised by Travel Alberta that the funding would be discontinued, and we would need to look at another alternative if we were going to be operating a visitors information center in Hinton. At that time, we approached the town of Hinton for partnership funding to help fill and address the tourism gap for Hinton. In March of 2020, as you're all aware, the pandemic hit, and this really posed a challenge for us because we weren't really sure how we were going to be able to provide visitor services, or if there was even going to be a desire for visitors to come and visit Hinton. Next slide, please. So why explore Hinton? The need to establish connections within the local community, creating a network of recreation, leisure, and business. We wanted to create a bit of a virtual and visual experience for travelers coming to Hinton. And we knew that there was going to be some challenges as to whether or not people were going to come into the center. And we wanted to be able to still entice visitors to come and visit us and do so in a safe manner. There was also a benefit as a local and to kind of show people that businesses had lots to offer for people coming to our community. Next slide, please. So what we've done so far, we've reconceptualized Explore Hinton Visitors Information Center. We've created a new website and social media and content strategy. Next slide. Explore Hinton Visitors Information Center. So the Visitor Center opened in a safe capacity on June 20th, and we were staffed until September 7th. The chamber staff now, Matt and I, are looking after the off-season visits when we get visitors coming in, and we're actually still getting quite a few visitors coming in, especially on these milder days. We had a very successful July and August, and we were quite surprised how many visitors we actually got. And it was busy. Like we were able to keep the gate down so that people weren't coming in and touching all of the brochures. And then we had our staff come up and kind of work with them and probe them a little bit as to what they were interested in and what they wanted to see and do. With the Explore Hinton site, which I'm going to talk a little bit further about, we quite often encourage them to go on and explore from their own tablets or iPhones what could be done in Hinton as well. Next slide, Wendy. This slide is just to showcase our wonderful staff that we had this summer. We were able to employ 3 local girls that are university students, and they did a great job, and this is with them wearing their wonderful Explore Hinton t-shirts. Next slide. I wanted to share with you some of the stats from this summer. So you're probably not surprised that we had no international travelers, but surprisingly enough, overall our numbers were only down about 20% from 2019. So they were down, but it wasn't near as bad as we thought. 96% of the travelers came from Alberta, and the majority of them were coming out of Edmonton, Grand Prairie, and other West Yellowhead communities. But what was really surprising is the main destination for visitors. 47% of people visiting the Hinton Visitors Information Center were here primarily to see Hinton. 29% of visitors came to visit Jasper. And it was interesting. A lot of them came with comments that they really wanted to try something new. They really wanted to avoid the crowds in Jasper. And they felt that Hinton had just as much to offer, maybe less expensive. And they just felt safe here. So I would say if there was anything that was positive about COVID is that this gave us a great opportunity to market our community. And I feel that the percentage of people that visited Hinton will return. They had lots to see and do, and they can hardly wait to come back. What were they asking for? a lot of hiking, Beaver Boardwalk, of course, the park passes and fishing licenses, William A. Switzer Park, but we had a huge uptake on the disc golf. We rent some of the discs here and we could barely, we didn't have enough to give to people. We could have had more. So people were really interested and they loved the fact that we had so many recreational things that were at no cost. Next slide. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about our new website, Explore Hinton. And before I do, I'd really like to say thank you to Scott Kovach and Josh Jaworski from the town of Hinton. Their contributions on this collaboration were fantastic. And of course, a special thanks to our Matt Davies from the Chamber that took this project and got it to where it is now. So if you haven't had an opportunity to look at the new site, explorehinton.org, I think you will be pleasantly surprised to see that we've been able to kind of encompass not only what Hinton has to offer as a tourism destination, but what what opportunities there are for them to visit our local businesses, restaurants, retail stores, hotel accommodations, and just basically a one-stop shop. We've been able to position and market kind of authentically a Hinton experience. Next slide, please. Our social media and content strategies. So Instagram seems to be growing like almost 5% every week. The engagement has been really good. It's a bit more of a visual aspect, and we find that more of the visitors from out of town seem to be engaged in Instagram. So 60%, what does it say? Following is about 60% local and 40% non-local. We have a lot of local people from Hinton following us on Facebook. And we've been creating a blog to kind of target partnerships between some funding that we received from Travel Alberta to create stories to kind of explain to people what it's like to really live in Hinton and what it would be like to be a tourist coming to our community. This quite often through the blog stories is almost a way to make some of our local people almost kind of that Hinton proud, give them some bragging rights of what there is to see and do in our community. Next slide, please, Wendy. The next slide, I kind of want to talk a little bit about cooperative marketing funding that we did through Travel Alberta. Again, this was a partnership between the Hinton Chamber and the Town of Hinton Economic Development Department. And we were able to collaborate and come up with some grant funding of $20,000 to be used towards an initiative for marketing purposes. The funds were used to do direct mail out. I believe you all received a postcard in your mailbox. We sent out 32,000 of these postcards to Edmonton, Grand Prairie, Red Deer, and surrounding areas, just to let people know that Explore Hinton was something that they wanted to look further into. We tried to make the postcard very visual, talk a little bit about play, eat, stay. We provided a contest on the back to entice people to engage in our social media. And we provided, we will be drawing on Friday actually, and the winner will receive a weekend back in Hinton with hotel accommodations, golfing, bike rentals, and all kinds of things to see and do. And we've had pretty good engagement on this, so that's been great. We've also used the funds to create more digital content for the site. We've come up with some blog stories for our website. And we've done some interpretive signage for the visitor center so that when people are coming in, we can kind of start to tell the story before they even get to the consultants for their visit. Next slide, please. So future opportunities for growth. We're going to continue to produce a high level of content. The site right now, we're very pleased at the point that it's at right now, but it will continue to grow and we will keep adding content to it throughout the year. On September 16th, tomorrow, we are going to be holding our first destination marketing meeting. Again, this is in partnership with the Economic Development Department for the town of Hinton. And we will be looking to see what is the right model for a destination marketing plan for Hinton. And we're hoping that that will open up the door for further tourism initiatives. We've also outlined opportunities to merchandise the Explore Hinton brand and increase municipal and regional partnerships. That is pretty much so all I have for you. I would like to say thank you to the town of Hinton for your continued support. And just if there's any questions or if I could tell you any more.
Well, thanks so much, Natalie. A lot of information, really positive information too. I'll open it up to council first before I say anything further. Council, any questions, comments? Councilor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Natalie, I just wanted to ask, the radio spots for Hinton Explorers, how did that come about? And, you know, how did that get put together?
That was actually organized by Scott Kovach from the town of Hinton. And there was some grant funding that came available through Stingray Radio. And we looked at this as an opportunity to really expose the Explore Hinton initiative. So it was just quick action by Scott and a collaboration, and it was very positive. We got lots of engagement from it.
Yeah, I only ask because, yeah, they were quite good ads and spots. Were those local voices by chance, or?
I'm not sure whose voices those were.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Council. I have one, Natalie. I'm happy it's in here and you mentioned the DMO. I'm excited for tomorrow. I think it's going to be a big meeting. Any other high-level information on it, timelines? Are we looking to push potentially for this somewhat quickly?
Well, we've got 4 models of different DMOs coming. So there will be Jasper Tourism, I believe, Grand Prairie, Red Deer, and Drayton Valley. So we're ideally, what the idea of the DMO meeting is to get an idea of different models that have worked for different communities. We do have strong participation. We've reached out to 20 of the hotels, campgrounds, and cabins in the area, and we're getting really good feedback and attendance for the meeting. So it'll really boil down to if we get the buy-in and how quickly we can get going on future plans. I know that this meeting is set up just so we can look at the models, and then the next meeting is scheduled for October 7th so that we can really get down into it. So just depending on how quickly we can roll things out, it would be great if we could get it going before the new year.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Council. Well, seeing none, I know you thanked Josh and Scott, so big thank you to you yourself. You're a big part of this. Matt, of course, is.
And Matt, yeah.
But this is the example that we need to do for every part of our organization. Is when you work together, good things happen. And I've only heard positive about Explore Hinton. There's tangible things in here that you're working. It's not just fluff stuff. And that's why we're not hearing anything negative. So thank you so much for all your work, everyone, Town of Hinton and Chamber. And we hope to hear from you soon again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Natalie. That'll bring us to our action items for this evening. Civic Partnership Policy, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council received this policy at last week's standing committee meeting, where direction was provided to bring the policy forward this week for decision. Civic partnership policy outlines process for predetermined categories for agencies classified as and includes category 1, intergovernmental agency partnerships, category 2A, capital infrastructure partnerships, and category 2B, external service and operations partnerships. The policy provides guidance for how the town considers, evaluates, and enters into partnership agreements, and was initiated due to requests council sometimes received during budget time and throughout the year. As discussed last week, the community grant program and annual donations, such as to STARS, as determined by council, are not covered by this policy. Administration's included a review period after 1 full year of implementation to troubleshoot or address any concerns or issues as we get going with this framework. The recommended action for this item tonight is that council approve the civic partnership policy number 1107. And Ms. Wade is present to help answer any questions that council might have tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? Councilor Nelson.
For the review after 1 full year, will that be 1 full year from when the policy is implemented, or 1 full year from? It's kind of a drawn out process in that people have to apply hopefully by February, then it's part of the budget. So is it after a full year of once applications have been through budget year, or a year from basically tonight if this is what passes?
Thank you through to Councillor Nelson. The next review date is included in the policy is January 30th, 2022. So giving us that actual full year of experience working with the policy. So not 1 year from tonight, but from once we hit the ground running in January.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, anything further? If not, I would entertain a motion. That's the will of council. Councilor Hawes.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that council approve the civic partnership policy number 1107.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes.
May I speak to it? First of all, appreciate the work that was done by administration to do this. This is something that I know during my term here, it's been somewhat of a difficult process trying to figure out what city agencies and partnerships and things of that nature. And I think again, this policy is an opportunity to build on that and to potentially learn eventually too, as well as like new policies, things may come up. But I think that it starts off well as to what are definitions of civic agencies and potential partnerships that could be within a town and to help those organizations. So I'll speak in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Councilor Nelson.
I'll actually not be speaking in favor of it. I've had another week to reach out and talk to different nonprofits and different groups and different volunteers in the community. And to me, this just adds more layers that reduces the opportunity for creativity and ability to implement things that are initiatives of the community. I even look at something we're dealing with tonight on the agenda, which is the golf course or this golf course parking lot. And by our policy, they wouldn't have had the information likely in time for us to be considering it during this budget, and it would likely be something that $100,000 that we were able to access with them might have to wait until another calendar year. So I just struggle to see. I think there's going to be so many exceptions and so many things that don't really fit. Because that's the nature of some of these partnerships, and better defining the ones that we have and having a little bit better conversations about the ones that we may add, I think is a great idea, but I just don't want to see volunteers and nonprofits have to jump through more hoops to bring an idea to council. After it's brought to council, then we have truly our only one political decision to make, which is, how does the community value the dollars that we put into all these different groups? And I think that is just a political decision. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor McGinn.
Well, and that was a concern of mine when we spoke about the standing committee. So just following that up, and I apologize because this is certainly repeating a question from standing committee. This policy doesn't limit us from exploring other avenues of funding for either capital projects or, of course, operating funding, those sorts of things. We still encourage outside agencies and organizations to come see us if they don't fit within this model. Is that correct?
Thank you through to Councillor McGowan. So to some extent that is correct. The policy was meant to provide a solution to an issue that had been ongoing as far as providing definitions to civic agencies to give some guidance to the community as well when they sought to come forward to request funding from council. Having no framework posed its own challenges. So through council direction and to meet a need that was expressed, we put together this policy based on what we saw other communities using.
May I follow up, Mr. Mayor? So I guess my question is, I absolutely agree, and I mean, for years as a councillor, I've always felt that there has been a need for a policy that outlines, you know, how do we partner with agencies, how do we promote projects, how do we go through that? And I want that to exist, but by the same token, just very clearly, I need to know that that doesn't stop the conversation. If an agency doesn't fit within this framework, that they, of course, can approach council and say, look, either the timeline doesn't work for our agency, if the context doesn't work and here's why, and we'd like you to consider another form of funding for us. Providing that avenue is still there, I'm absolutely supportive of that. And that's just what I need to know going forward in terms of assurance.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'm going to defer to Ms. Wade to just provide that clarification to the process as it was written.
Thank you, CAO Olson, through to the remainder of council. You're absolutely right, Councillor Magoon. This policy is meant to establish a process being a best practice. However, we recognize that especially in this first year, there's going to be plenty of groups trying to get in the door. And absolutely, we want to try and build those relationships, support them where we can. And this process does that for us. But of course, you know, if they don't fit in or they're having some challenges with the directive that we write and the process that we go through, then they absolutely, it's within their right to come to council and you know, have their concerns addressed.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go back in queue. I realized there was something. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor McGoon. Councilor Hawes.
Thank you. And if I may, I think that, of course, there might be some growing pains getting a policy into place in the first year, but I think once it's established, you know, and I look at the policy itself, the purpose, the consistency, the fairness, and demonstrate due diligence. I think this is where that framework is necessary because, unfortunately, you know, without having a policy, we're looking at each agency. You know, there isn't a consistency of a framework. It has potentially could be looked at as unfair, but if all agencies have a framework and a way of going through the process and brought to council at some point, then the fairness is increased, the consistency is increased, and I think that due diligence that we are using our budget dollars to what we feel as a council is necessary, either adds to our community or partnerships or whatever. So I think without this framework, again, we're just making decisions personally on the fly, and I think that, you know, with that policy, it achieves that consistency that we're looking for. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Councilor McGoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, again, I appreciate administration's response to that clarification. You know, and there was something that was mentioned there is that as we go through this process, I appreciate that, you know, this being like any other policy we have, really a living policy. This next year and a bit is going to give us the ability to take our learnings, take our experiences, to adapt the policy and to be an adaptive organization to what the community needs. And in hearing that we have that flexibility both with the policy and outside of it, in giving council that that political responsiveness to the needs of different organizations, I'm happy to support this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council approve the Civic Partnership Policy 1107. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That was carried 6-1. Council, anything further for this action item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration. That'll bring us to our second action item, Recreation and Parks User Fees Policy 82 Proposed Amendment. Town Manager Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. This item was brought forward to council on August 25th of this year, where council directed that it be brought forward to regular council for decision. Over the last few years, administration and council have received requests for the waiving or reduction of fees for use of town-owned recreation facilities, as well as open green spaces such as the area along the learning and leisure corridor between Bureau of Safety and the curling rink. As the policy and fee schedule will undergo a thorough review and update at the end of the 3-year term, which is up in March 2021, the review and amendments provided in this report are limited to the issue of free and reduced fee rates to provide for these types of requests from patrons. The recommended action tonight is that council approve Recreation and Parks User Fee Policy 082 as presented, and administration is happy to receive any questions that council might have.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in looking at the report, I'm not seeing any daily room rental for the parent link or the room that's used for kids activities. So I know right now that they are being used, or currently will be used in January, but should they be on here in the event that they do become available for rent?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michael. So as you mentioned, they're not included in this user fee policy as rentable spaces within the recreation center, as the parent link space will be used come January for the Family Resorts Network programming that'll take place in that space. The spaces for other children and youth activities I'm assuming the youth center space. So that again is used year round now that the pandemic restrictions have been lifted and children and youth are welcome back in the space. There aren't planned rental opportunities by administration at this point because they're used for other programming. Should those spaces become permanently available, we would either look to fill them through rental or through sort of occasional rental. But at this time, there's planned uses for those spaces, so they're not needed.
If the town were to rent one of those buildings or meeting rooms, does the town pay a user fee to rent? You know, like FCSS, they'll be using 2 of those rooms. Do they pay a user fee to the town or not because they're kind of help?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through Councilor Race. I don't believe they pay rent for the space. I'm not sure, Ms. Howarth, if you can elaborate on the arrangements. As far as I know, there's no rental.
Thank you. I couldn't quite hear the question that Councillor Race had. I'm trying to make it out, but before I answer it, I just want to make sure I know what her question was.
If I may, Councilor Race, the question was, does the town of Hinton pay for rent for its own rooms, like through FCSS? So if FCSS has a certain area that they use, do they have a rental rate that they pay for I guess a paper, for, I don't know what purpose, but essentially the question, yeah.
Right. So no, many years ago, there was a FCSS was charged a lease rate for all spaces that the municipality provided them. But many years ago, that was modified to have that as a town contribution toward the programs. If the FCSS program, that of course we receive partial funding from the province to provide, if we had to pay for all the leased space that they occupy to deliver the programs and services to the community, that would significantly reduce their ability to provide those programs and services because they would be having to budget for rent expenses.
Thank you. You know, my only concern is the rec center. I think our it costs us well over $2 million in our operating budget. So I want to make sure that we are tapping into every resource we can to generate some income out of that building. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Councilor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council approve Recreation and Parks User Fee Policy number 082 as presented. Speak to it briefly. takes care of some of the challenges that we've had, especially with nonprofits and green spaces, and I appreciate it and should make things straightforward moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we now have a motion on the floor. Any debate, questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question the council approve recreation and parks user fee policy 82 as presented. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for our second action item this evening? Seeing none, thank you, administration. Our third one is proposed parks and recreation service area addition golf course. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. At the standing committee meeting on September 8th, council discussed the addition of disc golf to the Parks and Recreation Service area. A request was made for some supplementary information to review as an overview to what else that service area includes. Administration's provided an attachment to which is the dashboard that was created for budget 2020 that outlines the services that is included in that division. As well, at the August 25th meeting, committee provided direction to administration to proceed with at the September 8th meeting, committee provided direction to administration to proceed with a proposed partnership agreement with the operation of the disc golf course, drafted in collaboration with the Hinton Disc Golf Association, and to bring that agreement to a future meeting of council for further direction and discussion. That's being targeted for the end of October. As direction on the HDGA partnership agreement has been received, and a decision to come after the agreement is reviewed by council, the recommended action for tonight includes that council approve the addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio for 2021 and beyond. Ms. Howard and Mr. Robert are here to assist in answering any questions council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council Magoon.
I'd like to make a motion that council approve the addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Recreation Service Area portfolio for 2021 and beyond. And I'll just speak to it briefly, Worship. For myself, this is a very high level discussion. I think a lot of the meat and potatoes, if you will, are going to come with the evaluation and discussions around the agreement. Of course, assuming that this continues to move forward. As spoken to by our presentation this evening with the chamber, this is an area that is growing really exponentially. And I think anyone who's been up to the Rob Road and seeing what the parking looks like between both the disc golf and our mountain bike park knows that we've got something good there, and that this is an area of opportunity for the town to partner up to work with what is a growing population of our community who are looking to expand in an area of recreation. And we can capitalize on that, and we can do so sustainably. And so I'm looking forward to having those discussions, but this is that first step. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Councilor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have a verbiage question, and looking at some of the questions we've had for motions made from years past, the and beyond part, is that something that will make sense to both administrations and councils of the future? Or should we maybe look at saying indefinitely? And it makes no difference to me as we're in the room and we know how this conversation went, but in many years, if they're looking back on a motion, is it going to be sensible at that time?
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. CEO Olson, any comment on the verbiage?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I suppose it is subjective. The and beyond does indicate to me that it's moving forward 2021 and afterward. If council has any concerns about that language, changes are welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, and I'd be certainly happy to consider a friendly amendment to the verbiage to, reflect something to the effect of, the council approve the permanent addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Rec Service Area portfolio. And I think that sort of accomplishes the same sort of thing, but I'll sort of duck over to Councillor Nelson if that's okay and see if that achieves what he's looking for.
Yeah, I think that would help for the future, because and beyond could mean for 2021 and 2022, right? And it might save some stress and trying to figure out in future years, especially if it's looking back on things that were committing maintenance dollars and funding to. I think it would be very, very good for it to show that this is meant to be indefinite, not for a couple of years. So thank you, and thank you, Ms. Councilor Magoon.
And if you can look at the screen just to make sure that the changes.
And I have it commencing in 2021.
I'm solid with that, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Haas.
I too will be speaking in favor of this. I do want to, though, add to the, this is, again, I'm happy to see the policy that we discussed earlier this evening in regards to, where an organization such as this or a group of people that came together, put together this, but having that conversation with council ahead of time, with administration, moving forward. So I'm excited, that policy is in place now after tonight for future endeavors like this, because I personally, I think that would have benefited both the park and the town, from the get-go working together rather than in the afterwards. So I think, I'm totally in favor of this. I too, hearing what Natalie said tonight as well, and the response that, outsiders were given, the golf course, this golf course is great, and I think it's attracting lots of good people into our community. I'm just looking forward to in the future starting that conversation, in the beginning of it and setting it up. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I think it is important to identify, though, that for those folks in our town who are maybe concerned about what this support might put in terms of pressure on the town infrastructure and ultimately money, are we considering that? And I'd say absolutely. But those details get hammered out with the agreement that we developed jointly with the Disc Golf Society. So that is something absolutely we can look at. What happens if interest wanes in the sport? Can we sustainably develop this and develop sort of an exit strategy? And I would say yes, we can, but that's part of the development agreement that we're gonna look at moving forward.
Thanks, Councillor Magoon. And I'll support this even with the verbiage change. I did like and beyond because I've watched a lot of Toy Story lately, almost every day. So it'll pay me, but I'll go with the will of council. And, I have nothing else productive to add. Council, anything further for this motion? And seeing none, I'll call the question that council approve the permanent addition of disc golf to be included in the Parks and Recreation Service area portfolio commencing in 2021. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further for the third action item this evening? And seeing none, it will bring us to our final action item, recreation parking capacity expansion at Rob Road. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Recreation parking capacity on Rob Road has been a topic of concern with the community over the last year or so, with a request for additional parking coming forward through the Hinton Disc Golf Association during budget deliberations for 2020. The request was considered and ultimately not fulfilled through the budget for 2020. However, legwork by HDGA and HIMBA, as well as support from the town of Hinton, have brought the project to a point where council's consideration of the use of funds committed by Trans Mountain for parking on Rob Road for the project is requested. The recommended action for this item tonight is that council approve an allocation from the town of Hinton Trans Mountain Pipeline Memorandum of Understanding to be utilized by the town to design and construct additional recreation parking at Rob Road. Again, Ms. Howard and Mr. McLaren are present to support any additional information requested by council.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council. Councilor Magoon.
I'd like to make the motion that council approve an allocation of $100,000 from the town of Hinton Trans Mountain Pipeline Memorandum of Understanding to be utilized by the town to design and construct additional recreational parking at Rob Road. And just speaking to it briefly, Your Worship, I just want to express appreciation to our community members who brought this issue forward to us and brought it to our attention. It's something that a lot of people aren't aware of, that don't go up and use the facility or travel on the Rob Road. But I think it's a real safety issue. But more than that, I think it's a real opportunity. We have a growing membership in both of these areas, and that puts some positive pressure on us to develop. And for myself, I think that's tremendous. That's a great opportunity. Very specifically, I would like to send out a huge thank you to Mr. Jan Busbottom for advocating in such a positive way on this, and being someone who says, look, this is a safety issue, and I'm very positively going to work at lobbying council to make some positive change. And I know it helped for both myself and other councillors, and I appreciate that because that's how the system democratically is supposed to work. So I'm very excited to be moving forward with this.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Councilor Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only concern that I have is when I read this, it looks like the town of Hinton and Trans Mountain Pipeline have each committed money to make up this $100,000. And it's my understanding that this $100,000 is coming solely from the Trans Mountain. So when I read this, and I'm concerned that citizens would read this and think that the town, is contributing, monies. You know what I'm saying?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. So the memorandum of understanding is between the town of Hinton and Trans Mountain Pipeline. So that's why it's worded in that way. I don't know if that alleviates your concern, but it would be helpful to provide that explanation to community members should they ask.
Yes, and I think that's what I would have to do. I would have to say the town is not contributing any of this money. This money is all coming from Trans Mountain, and the town and Trans Mountain entered an agreement. So I thought maybe it should be reflected there, but I'm good.
Thank you, Councilor Reyes. Councilor Stashin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to speak in favor of the proposed motion. I think this partnership between the town of Hinton, Trans Mountain Pipeline, Hinton Disc Golf Association, and Hinton Mountain Bike Association is a great example of how our business community can work with the municipality and nonprofit groups to, help some of those nonprofit groups achieve some things that might be beyond the scope and ability of any of the individual partners, but when all the partners come to the table, they can accomplish something that's pretty impressive. So hopefully we can see more of these types of partnerships between business community and municipality moving forward. And this one I fully support and look forward to voting on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashin. I had one question. It's regarding inside the MOU, it talks about the project design, scope, and construction. It says Trans Mountain is responsible for the funding design. And I wanted, and a few people or residents that came to me and talked about what does that process look like in finalizing the design with the disc golf club, with the town of Hinton, with Trans Mountain. So any insight on who has the final say, if there's any conflicts on picking where the parking lot should go, et cetera, et cetera?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Ms. Howard and Mr. Von Claveren have been the points of contact for the town with Trans Mountain. I'm not sure if that process has been fully established yet, or if any discussions have come about regarding, I guess, not seeing eye to eye on what the plan is moving forward. Ms. Howard, if you have anything to add or any pieces of conversation that you have to share.
Thank you. At this, if council approves this, the next steps would be to start to work with development services. And so the group would contact the folks down in that division, and that's Peter Vanna and his crew. So they're the ones that would determine sort of what do we need, where does it go, what's the best sense, design, detailed design, things like that. And as the process goes, some of the factors may change in order to fit the scope of either the budget or the use in the area and all the other conditions that some of the other stakeholders have already established in their approvals. So unless there's anything else that Mr. Vanna wants to add, it does kind of get passed over to development services after tonight.
Thank you for that, Ms. Howard. I guess my only follow-up, so I just want to clarify that moving forward, there will be ongoing conversation with HIMBA and the disc golf club in order to make sure that everyone's input is sort of part of this, because Unfortunately, it's not in the MOU, understanding that it's Trans Mountain, it's their responsibility and things should move forward. But we have a commitment to work with these stakeholders on an ongoing basis, not just from what they've agreed to in the past. I just wanted to make that clear if that is the case or not.
That is absolutely the case, yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haas?
You asked my question, so thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Council, we have a motion on the floor. I forget. Yeah, Councilor Good. Any further debate, questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question that Council approve the allocation of $100,000 from the Town of Hinton Trans Mountain Pipeline Memorandum of Understanding to be utilized by the town to design and construct additional recreation parking at Robb Road. Council, all those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Council, anything further for this action item? And seeing none, that'll bring us to our information items. And the first one is the Economic Development Status Update. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Town of Hinton Economic Development Officer Scott Kovach has prepared a presentation on the achievements and work completed to support economic development in Hinton and the economic development strategy that council has endorsed. At this point, I'll turn it over to Scott. He has a short presentation to take you through what he's been working on over the last 14 months. And afterwards, welcome any questions that council might have or clarification that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Olson, and it is a pleasure to be in front of Mayor and Council this evening to provide an economic development status update. First, we'll provide a brief background and discussion points. We will discuss the four main objectives of, thank you, the four main objectives being one, improve investment readiness and proactively attract targeted sectors, implement business retention and expansion programming, and increase tourism marketing and asset development, as well as objective number 4, develop a housing strategy to support income residents and population growth. This all based on a strategy that was developed in conjunction with administration and the HREDC in 2015 and up until 2018, and then when I was hired in 2019. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Developing and maintaining external relationships, an essential task for economic development professionals and organizations. So over the last 14 months, established and maintained relationships with HREDC, the Chamber of Commerce, Community Futures West Yellowhead, Alberta Labour and Immigration, Alberta Economic Development and Trade, and Travel Alberta, as well as creating new relationships with the Northwest Alberta Charging Network. Next slide, please. So planning for moving forward and following in step with the economic development strategy, the 4 main goals as well, again, to reiterate, business retention, business expansion, business attraction, and tourism. Next slide, please. So reviewing activities to date, economic development has immediately put boots on the ground for the community by focusing on those 4 key objectives identified in the economic development strategy. And we can prove a marked impact on the community. Next slide, please. Also important is improving investment readiness and proactively attracting targeted sectors. So over the past 14 months, again, in conjunction with HREDC administration, based on recommendations through the strategy, developed a retail pitch deck, and that asset was used to attract retail business. I had the good fortune of being involved in the International Shopping Center Conference in Whistler, which provided some great leads, as well as the Edmonton Franchise Expo. And so those both garnered multiple site visits, and also over the last 14 months, developed a second pitch deck, which is geared towards the resource supply chain investment. Next slide, please. So implementing business retention and expansion program is also very important. So over the past 14 months, created a business retention, attraction, and expansion visitation strategy, which was shared with partner organizations with the goal of collaboration. And so also involved other groups as well in the second CARES application submitted for the support of Lone Eagles, and which we dubbed the digital mining the digital divide. And so we continue to work on that strategy. We applied for the CARES grant and were successful, and we had input from the Chamber of Commerce and from Labor and Immigration. Next slide, please. Implement the business retention and expansion continued. Economic development staff implemented a COVID-19 business survey, an economic recovery response strategy based on the impact survey results, and you would have seen those at the last meeting. And so we explored grant applications to support things such as research, training, and the development of a workshop series. And those workshop series would include new information for the business community regarding e-commerce, recruitment, and confidence communications. Next slide, please. So next on the list is increasing tourism marketing and asset development, which is also straight from the strategy that was developed in 2018 and refined in 2019. Worked with Destination Alberta, Northern Alberta Rockies to establish a group that markets regional assets. Organized meetings to establish a business model for destination marketing, which our partner in the Chamber of Commerce talked about earlier. And this particular DMO would function possibly via the fund derived from no taxpayer dollars in generating revenue from hotel guests. And the fund would support product development, event development, as well as support marketing. Unfortunately, the first event was canceled due to COVID, but is scheduled for tomorrow night. And at this point in time, we're expecting between 30 and 40 guests to attend, which will include invitations to the Chamber Board of Directors, Danner members, hoteliers, Travel Alberta, and our own council. Next slide, please. So further with tourism, increasing tourism market asset development, we, as you learned earlier, partnered with the Chamber of Commerce. We wrote several grants, which were based on visiting friends and relatives with regards to the Travel Alberta Cooperative Marketing Program, focused specifically on inbound traffic from Alberta. And at that point in time, the application included support for the development of a DMO and obviously some direct marketing. And as spoken to earlier by Natalie, by request from Councillor Hawes, we did also undertake an 8-week free program through Stingray Radio, which was fairly accessible for the in-close market, which included Edson and Whitecourt. And I do have the numbers, the productivity numbers for that I can share if they're needed in the future. Next slide, please. So we did the work with Travel Alberta's cooperative marketing program, and we did deliver the 30,000 plus direct mail pieces to within 300 kilometers of Hinton. Some more drop-down details that were provided. Weekly, there were 6,000 to 8,000 impressions on Facebook and 352 followers since June 2020. Prior to getting online for the Zoom meeting this afternoon, I met with Zen Seekers, who's responsible for the implementation of our social media program through Travel Alberta. And we were expecting an Instagram flow-through rate of 3%. A good average for a campaign is 5%. Our current engagement with this program is 7.5%, which is more than double the average. And as far as the other 4 social media campaigns that we're involved with through this particular contractor, we have doubled our expectations, and we are leading the pack with all of the statistics regarding any type of social media engagement through the contractor. And so in speaking to that, earlier I mentioned that we had a radio program, our advertising program. I need to do a shout out for Josh. The script was actually developed by Josh based on some storylines that we put together. So thank you very much, Josh. And when you have an opportunity, Council, please remember to thank Josh for all the hard work that he's done for us with regards to developing tourism this year. Next slide, please. So developing housing support and income, residence, and population growth as per the strategic plan that was adopted in 2019. So worked alongside Development Services to partner with the Evergreen Foundation to assess the needs for and the viability of developing seniors and other housing needs on the McMillan lands. We completed a due diligence report, and most recently we had a design charrette engagement, and Peter will keep you posted on that through Development Services, but it is my understanding that we will have some information with regards to estimates and costs that will come to us sometime. Next slide, please. So other activities that I've focused on as well outside of what was defined in the strategic plan, there was an evolution of a business, Valley Business Association that's happened, and been involved in those meetings to support where we can any ideas or concepts for marketing, and particularly landed on some issues with regards to assisting them with developing some signage programs for them. Continue to participate in the business support network, and as you've heard earlier, become involved with the North Alberta charging network station, which I feel is great to highlight our community as a proactive, forward-thinking community from an energy perspective, but also is a keen way to market to a targeted group of tourists. Next slide, please. So looking forward, now that we've seen what we've done, we're going to look at what we could possibly do next. Next slide, please. So overall, based on putting the tools in the toolbox, creating a sector and opportunity profile is an opportunity for us to respond to the gap analysis that was put together as part of our strategy with our consultants. And so that will allow us to identify and capitalize on gaps that exist in our community based on information that we collected, and as well through focus groups that were held in the community. So the critical path for success, there's also a risk of inaction that would emerge. And so it's essential that we have a long-term planning and a foundation for success. And so the following priorities are emphasized and should occur as soon as possible after the adoption of a strategy. Next slide, please. So from a business expansion and retention program, we need to dedicate staff and time to developing the relationships and maintaining communications with the local business. The role is to connect with existing businesses together or existing businesses with external opportunities to form new relationships and to foster new business. The goal is to reduce disengagement and the risk of business flight from the community, to make the business community aware of the supports that could assist them to remain in the community and to expand in the community. Next slide, please. So one of the top issues that was identified in the strategic plan was destination marketing organization, or a destination marketing fee to support tourism. So there was a strong consensus that this was a very good idea. There were barriers to it, and it's necessary for someone in some fashion to take a lead. And so I've done that in conjunction with the Danner Group and with the Chamber of Commerce. The greatest ability to be a game changer is with the destination marketing fee. It's securing long-term sustainability of growth in tourism sector, but also that growth in the sector will attract new small businesses and new residents. Next slide, please. Again, from the strategic plan that was adopted by council, over time, there seems to be a significant demand for new housing, but the community has not necessarily been proactive in completing and understanding the challenges and implementing an appropriate plan of action. So most important step is to create a long-term strategy that includes a comprehensive consultation with developers and employers and existing residents, and to some degree the Dine Charrette has started that process. Status quo is likely to remain because landowners have priorities in other communities, and employers may not be sufficiently telling their stories to fill the void. Next slide, please. A proactive communication and a marketing plan is very important for the success of economic development in Hinton. Hinton has many strengths and can leverage those being market readiness in several instances. Small businesses are very strong. The value chain opportunities exist here. There are a significant amount of lone eagles that can grow their businesses and operate independently. And there are opportunities for success stories through Hinton First. And in the near future, we will be launching Hinton Success Stories, which is a podcast that will, a pilot that will run for the next 3 months. And so we've identified a number of entrepreneurs in the community that will create a stay the course message and will possibly be seen as mentors to those businesses that possibly could be struggling. So also important along with those examples is the need to develop a communication plan and a marketing strategy that buoys the internal spirit. So we've got all of this stuff that's going on. We're doing some really good work, and we know internally that we're doing it. We've got to spend some time identifying who our target markets are, identify what kind of messages we can send to them, and find ways to identify that if we're sending those messages that they're being received, and then we can use that to mobilize on opportunities for business relocation and business expansion. Next slide, please. So our biggest challenge is going to be budget implications, and growing responsibilities, shrinking resources are impacting communities. Provincial investments in local communities are being made via grants and other opportunities, but more needs to be done if the town wants to be sustainable and competitive in the national marketplace. The town of Hinton has and will continue to face budget limitations when it comes to resourcing economic development initiatives. With limited resources, the town will need to consider how best to invest in economic development activities and programs, always aiming to provide the greatest return for investment while addressing the core issues, again, of economic diversification, residential growth, industrial and commercial land development, investment attraction, business retention and expansion support activities, and small business support services. Next slide, please. So working towards the economic development goals appears on track. Economic development staff remain dedicated to the direction provided in the town of economic development, the town of Hinton's economic development strategy, and will review related strategies and policies annually for relevance and new trends that may impact the future economic development in Hinton. Next slide, please. So the next steps are to continue to support business in Hinton, continue to working on the top 4 economic development priorities, engaging local business partner organizations to ensure business support services are provided in response to recent COVID-19 outbreaks. It has been a pleasure to be here for the first 14 years of my hopefully long and illustrious career in Hinton, and I look forward to working with administration and council and our organization partners, and would entertain any questions at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Kovach. I have one to start off. You had mentioned at different points regarding housing, senior housing, evergreens, things of that nature. To focus a little bit more on that, with Macmillan lands, do we have timelines or sort of a more specific message we can tell residents in the community? Because that's probably the question I get asked most on a very specific economic development approach to adding housing, senior housing to our community. What can people expect, let's say 6 months from now?
Okay, so at this point in time, I would ask that Peter Vanna respond to that question.
Sure, I can do that. So in October, the consultant will be coming back with the pro forma and the final report for council presentation. So we'll be looking for council to approve that report and the pro forma. And as part of that meeting, what I'd also like to do is to have council begin the process of designating the lands for that purpose. So taking the concept plan and approving it as a direct control district so that we can ensure that the vision for that area moves forward. We're also putting some dollars aside. We have some preliminary numbers on first stage of development, so we'll be putting that into the capital budget for council's consideration as part of the budget process. And as part of the consultant's review, we will certainly be putting forward a next steps in terms of timelines and what the next steps and process will be. But certainly part of that will also involve our further discussions with Evergreen as a partner in this, to see where they can fit into this and help us out in terms of that. Certainly part of this is there is some CMHC dollars that we could potentially access from this, and so we'd be trying to see if we can work with Evergreen to try and access those dollars.
Thank you, gentlemen. Councilor Nelson.
I'm understanding that the strategies and the goals came through a HRDC collaboration. If council wanted to update or evolve some of the strategies or priorities, is that through HRDC? Is that through our strat plan? What's the kind of mechanism for evolution of that?
Ms. Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. The mechanism would be through strategic planning to create that priority and discuss any additional wishes of council. The economic development strategy is council's strategy and the town of Hinton strategy, though it identifies partner relationships with regional and local partners to advance the strategic priorities included. So at the point at which council identifies that change is needed or the priorities that are set in that strategy are no longer current or they wish to update them, that's something that could be provided as direction to administration, and at which point, just as previous administration work with the HRDC as the steering group for that document, and we would look at what's available to us in the interest of HRDC members in moving that forward.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I think I've been really impressed with a lot of the initiatives that have come out of this. I know there's a lot of talk about economic development and what direction we wanted to take, and I think the strategies are meeting the needs of, or the outcomes are meeting the needs of the strategies. But when these strategies were created, tech was still open and running at full steam. Bighorn wasn't facing the challenges it's facing right now, and COVID had never been heard of before. So, whether it's at strategic planning, I look forward to having some of those conversations of, maybe changing the targets a little bit away from potentially the retail side of it and more into the industry side, or making sure we can support, the gaps that exist in our community will only become larger if there aren't good paying jobs to support those gaps. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Councilor McGoon.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Nelson, because I think that hits on my concerns as well, is that in being adaptive to our current situations, one of the things that I'd like to make sure that we give consideration through strat planning when it comes to our economic plans and strategies is what policy-based approaches can this council take control of to really try and invest and support business, new business expansion in the town of Hinton as it relates to mid or even, fingers crossed, larger scale industrial, commercial applications and organizations investing in our community and putting people to work. Because we've seen what happens when you have a major employer in town, move towards the determination of the services they offer and how that impacts the citizens in our community. And that's something that I've really struggled to promote for a number of years. So I'd like, I'm just throwing that out to council as a whole. That's something as we move into strat planning that I'll continue to advocate for when it comes to our economic expansion plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGoon. That was my second question, and I guess it's partially answered that we'll deal with that at strat planning, but I'll still extend it to Mr. Kovach in the sense of many residents, business owners, people, they'll come to council and they'll talk about the example of Cascade going to Edson, and are we ready for the expansion part? I know retention is extremely important for making sure we provide opportunities for people to continue the status quo, the businesses they have in this community. But if someone were to ask us, well, are we ready for a major investment in our community? If that were to be the case, being obviously positioned extremely well off a major highway and having rail by our side and not overly far from the Pacific Ocean. Any thoughts on that, Mr. Kovach, on where would Hinton fall and what are things that we should maybe look at being prepared to bring a new industry in our community?
Sure. Some of the things that, thank you, Mayor. Some of the things that we have to be cognizant of that help us move forward is the information that's available and it is ready to provide to those potential investors. It's not necessarily just our location, which is definitely important. There are other things that we need to take into consideration. We need to understand where our employment base is, right? And what type of support mechanisms we have inside the community. So you could attract a large business to your community, but do you have the supply chain in order to support it? Do you have the qualified and skilled labor to support it? Do you have training mechanisms that are there to be able to grow with that industry as it co-locates or relocates? So the question is a good question, but I frankly don't have an immediate answer for you. I think that the immediate answer that would help us feel comfortable about what we're doing is that as long as we continue to monitor trends and to make sure that we've got the information that we can respond to immediately, we will continue to be on the radar screen for those folks that see us as an investment community or an opportunity, right? So because some of this is so specific to an industry or a piece of that industry, in whether it's either the location or the labor, it's a question I can't answer, but we can certainly continue to strategically plan to be able to respond to it by having the types of information and profiles necessary to react as quickly as possible or quicker than other communities that would be entertaining the same investment.
Thank you. Council. And seeing none, thank you, Mr. Kovach, Mr. Vanna, Ms. Olson, for the update. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
That'll bring us to our second information item this evening. Council, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Hawes.
I'll move that we accept council information packages number 1 and number 2 for September 15th, 2020.
Thank you, Councilor Hawes. Council. See none, all in favor? Councilor Race.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
I just have to, get to Gary. So I did want to talk about,
Okay, one moment. Procedurally, I don't remember what just happened. There's no vote from Councilor Race.
Off the top of my head, I'm not too sure. Give me 1 second.
Sir, I do apologize. I was on the information package page and then I went to find the letter and
Apologies.
What we'll do is we'll take a 3-minute recess and we'll reconvene at 5:25. Fine. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to reconvene at 5:25. See you all.
Thank you, and apologies for taking a moment to reflect on the procedure bylaw in order to determine a path forward. Given that the motion was called to vote, all members of council must vote, and as well are not permitted to leave their seat or make any noise or disturbance while the vote is being taken. If Councillor Race has something to add after the vote has been taken, if she wishes to request more information of administration,
Does someone have their thing?
or as well to create an additional motion related to the information packages, she may do so through notice of motion or through administrative inquiries. That's the next one.
So on that note, do I recall the question to vote?
So under 25.6, the question on the results of the vote may be resolved by the mayor immediately calling for confirmation of voting results. So just by show of hands.
So based on the confirmation of voting results, who votes in favor? And that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much, administration, for getting through this. And Councillor Race, did you have anything regarding this matter?
I will wait till we get to notice of motions or administrative part.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that'll bring us to our reporting, and I will start to my left today with Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a CAC meeting last week, and I've already sent out an email to all of council. They'll be looking to get some input from council and then just with regards to where their efforts are best directed and getting feedback from the community this fall. Also looking forward to our first Community Futures meeting in quite a few months on Friday. Other than that, I thought Councilor reports.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have very little report. We haven't yet to have a committee meeting yet. However, we have started very initial conversations as a library board. Had some feedback from the community wanting the library to be reopened to patrons. So we're in the very initial stages of looking at how that's going to look and for our stage 4. So looking forward to getting back to some symptoms of order there. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Nelson.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have an inquiry that I'd like to make of administration. I did provide some email forewarning about the topic. I would also like to sort of preface that with an apology. I don't know if or how discussions occurred on the subject while I was away. And if that's the case, I'd like to extend my apologies, and I hope I'm not infringing too much on administration or council's time.
So Councillor Wood, is this an administrative inquiry?
This is part of my public, I'd like to take liberty to discuss this openly as part of my reporting package.
So could we do that at the reporting time for other administrative inquiries? Unless it's pertaining to one of your reporting for one of your committees?
Well, in a way it covers both, but if you prefer it to be under administrative inquiries, absolutely, sure.
If there's a request potentially to do, that would be my preference, that it would be under the administrative inquiries. If
Sure.
any direction given to or asked from administration.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll hold off till then. The second item is just that we will be meeting as a golf board tomorrow evening. I think hot topics of discussion are, of course, transferring of assets, that sort of thing. So the board will be taking a vote tomorrow. So council will be attending, and then I'll give you a full report following that on how that goes. But I'm also sure administration will come towards council with some information related to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Meehan. Councilor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly hope this has not been reported on yet. We, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, we met with people at the Scout Hall. About 14 people. And they had concerns about the building, they had concerns about the guardrails. They wanted this area to be part of our Parks and Rec. I am such an advocate for community and town, coming together and working on a project. And that did not appear to be their appetite. They would like this to be a town project. It was, I thought, a really, really good, time with that part of the community. And that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Councilor Stashik. Thank you, Councilor Stashik. For myself, we had an RCP PAC meeting. Unfortunately, Fire Chief Martins could not be there, so half of it, or a big chunk of it, I can't speak to because he wasn't there. The one topic that we spent a reasonable amount of time was there's been statistics out there that domestic violence has increased during COVID and things of that nature, and not to say that any domestic inputs or how did we phrase it? Any complaints that came in, they're grouped all together. So there was an indication that many of them were just conflicts, verbal issues of a lower category. Now, if you recall, with McLean's and Hinton being one of the most dangerous places to live, it's how those statistics are sort of broken up and explained, and unfortunately, this one was grouped in on a wide scale. So they will speak to that in the coming weeks when they come to council, but wanted to get that out of there, that because many people are saying, okay, is domestic abuse a very big issue in Hinton? Of course, it's serious and it's still an issue, but it was misleading in the sense that, okay, it's maybe not at the level some people perceive by seeing those statistics. So, but more clarification will come when Staff Sergeant Murphy comes to council shortly. And that's it for myself. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. A couple of things to highlight. Tomorrow begins the Women in Politics sessions that have been supported by our very own Jenna Eltragi, as well as Nancy Robbins and her team from Community Futures West Yellowhead. This was made possible through a grant that the town and Community Futures applied for through FCM. To provide resources for the Lunch and Learns and information to folks in the West Yellowhead region around gender parity and the importance of that, different levels of government. So looking forward to that kicking off tomorrow. There's a Lunch and Learn from 11:30 to 1:30 for the next 3 weeks, so starting tomorrow. As well, just to highlight that the pool is open as of Monday. COVID measures are in place to keep patrons safe and are detailed on the website and in the ComServe edition from last week. Increased cleaning protocols, sign-in procedures, and other measures will have impact on pool use and the experience in the rec center moving forward. But just want to acknowledge we're doing our best to balance the community needs with our obligations and responsibilities for public and employee safety. And we appreciate the patience and understanding from our user groups and public as we get used to these changes moving forward. And then just a reminder that to check your weekly editions of ComServe to receive info and information on community services, programs, facilities, and any changes through the pandemic. It's in the agenda package as well, but as an information item, or in the information package as an information item, and has a lot of very valuable information for the community and for council alike. And that's it for me.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Now we'll move on to administrative inquiries. Councilor Good.
Thank you, Worship, and I apologize for not choosing the more appropriate of the areas. So I guess my question to administration, and if I could just get the whole thing out because I think it's a little more encompassing than a simple question. In being gone, I tried to educate myself a little bit on the issue. I read the article provided by the Hinton Voice that covers this issue. I think that was an important starting place. But that being said, there have been a number of concerns shared with me from citizens about inquiring why, as a town, Hinton essentially didn't receive grants on this particular intake of federal grant funding. And I share those concerns, but I'd like to know more about that. So I think in general, that's my overall inquiry to administration. Now, understanding that there may be in-camera information or there may be out-of-camera information. I'm patient on whatever administration can provide now or has to provide in camera. But the second part of that as well, as part of the article that was shared with The Voice, Administration had mentioned that there's several grant applications in the works for other confirmed intakes. And I think in looking ahead to where we want to be, that's important. So I was rather hoping that in the coming weeks, if administration has any more information on what those dates may be and what projects might be included in that, that would be really important for myself as a counselor to be able to take out to the community to say, well, actually, here's where we're going. We're not finished with the grant application process. And again, I think that might allay some of the fears that are out there this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. As I've shared some of this information with council previously, just to bring you up to speed on where we are with some of this, and I've spoken to council as well. I don't have a problem with providing a little bit of that information now and then seeing if there's anything further that's required moving forward. So like I said, as I've shared with council, the intentions were there to apply for the funds through that intake. Conversations, information was shared, however, ultimately no application was submitted. We recognize that this is an error. We've been working with the team to understand the situation, to set expectations for the identification and the continued use of grant opportunities like this moving forward. And to speak to the grant applications that were in the works, we've applied for our municipal stimulus program funds just even in the last week to support some of the improved infrastructure projects that are in the capital plan. So typically we're not chasing every funding opportunity that hasn't been, that are for projects that council hasn't endorsed or approved through that planning. But we're doing what we can to rectify the situation and to look forward to the opportunities that are coming down the pipe and make sure that we're prepared. And we're having those conversations as administration to make sure that we can capitalize on any of the opportunities moving forward to fund items within our capital plan and those infrastructure projects. So we strive overall as administration for the responsible use of tax dollars at every level, and we prioritize those applications moving forward to make sure that we're poised and ready for the opportunities that as they arise. We do apply for grants regularly, we do receive them regularly, and perhaps we could do I could do a better job of bringing that to council's attention when we have received funds. So I hope that goes a little ways to explain what happened and what we're doing to make sure that we're ready to jump on any opportunities moving forward. And if there's any further information that we're doing that you will request the council's looking for through this administrative inquiry, I will provide what I can.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Ms. Olson. Council, any other administrative inquiries? Councilor Rice.
Sir, I will be emailing my administrative inquiry next week.
Okay, thank you. Seeing none, any notices of motion? And seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go in camera with a 5-minute break. Councilor Waugh.
Break to be determined by our chair.
All those in favor? That was passed unanimously.